think I said this in my interview with Ferguson, that, we can be talking here as long as we want, but anyone looks David Attenborough, narrate 1 minute from the Kibale National Park of this raid going on, and they're just going to forget everything we said. And it's like, it feels so unbelievably familiar.
It's really freaky. It's scary, and you see how similar it looks, just sort of the coalitional dynamics that you might expect a group of humans to produce.
Yeah. Well, okay, I think that's the place then for me to make the counter, which is to say that yes, chimpanzees are capable of war. But the question was never about whether humans are capable of war or whether chimpanzees are capable of war. Yeah, we're capable. But the perspective that someone who just skims through the chimpanzee literature, and especially its popularization, might get is that chimpanzees are these kind of creatures that are hardwired to immediately, if they can, attack members of an outgroup. This happens all the time. The wars are like the thing you expect if you study chimpanzees. But if you are someone like Brian Ferguson, takes a bit of a skeptical eye, reads through every single documented account of a chimpanzee killing another chimpanzee, what you find is that you have two wars, which have very interesting causes for the wars, but you have two wars. And outside of those two wars, a killing of an outgroup member happens once in around 30 years of observation. And even within those wars, if I remember his data right, it's around 1 kill per year of observation, a little bit over one per year. And so even in chimpanzees, first of all, it's not nearly as kind of universally present as some accounts would make it out to be. And secondly, when we look at when it occurs, these are not very pristine environments. It's not as simple as immediately when humans go in, you start having war. But there is a story to be told. For example, when Jane Goodall witnessed the chimpanzee war at Gombe National Park, there's a very interesting story behind it on how you start giving bananas to both groups, then you stop giving it to one group, you only give bananas to this other group. Basically what Ferguson said was that, look, it's not human impact that makes chimpanzees do war, but it is any human impact which pits one chimpanzee group against another. So yeah, they're capable of doing war, but it's nowhere near as big part of the kind of chimpanzee nature as we might think from some popular or even scholarly accounts, you would say. So I guess that's the counter. Your turn.
Well, let me ask you this question. You did the same experiment that Jane Goodall did, provisioning bonobos. Would you see groups of bonobo males going out, attacking solitary bonobos from the other group and killing them?
Good question. And you would say that the answer is no.
Yeah, it's possible. If you took a group of, let's say, rabbits, for instance, in a resource scarce environment, just to pick like a really trivial example, and you put lots and lots of fresh grass and dandelion stems out, where the rabbits form coalitions and just start killing each other over them. No, idea is they wouldn't. They're not capable of it. So if you're capable of it, right? So if you're going to say chimpanzees are capable of it, when did that capability evolve? It didn't evolve with Jane Goodall starting to put bananas out. It didn't evolve with Nagogo getting this larger population, right? So presumably it evolved sometime in the species evolutionary history prior to Jane Goodall showing up in 1970 or 68 or whenever it was.
Yeah, fair enough. But I think that let's think about slavery. It's a bit tricky when talking about possible enslavement in hunter-gatherers, but it's at least a possibility. And enslaving people did not occur before you started having settled societies. Let's say that it's not an impossible hypothesis. Well, you could then say something like slavery is not something that has deep roots in human history. It emerges very late. Yeah, the capacity for it emerged with our big brains and our, 5 digits and all of those things, but the action only emerges later on. And I think that that's what kind of someone like Ferguson would say about war, is that, yeah, of course, both chimps and humans have the capacity, because of all of the kinds of things that we have, capacity to work in coalitions, capacity to use violence as a problem-solving mechanism. But it doesn't mean that it has had this really this constant presence throughout the evolutionary history.
So what was the selective mechanism? What was the selective pressure for chimpanzees to form these tight coalitions where they attack lone individuals from another group, right? Like it seems to me to be a very sort of specific behavior. You don't see, and I don't know the record well enough, but you have, provisioning, more resource stress, you don't see all different types of aggression increasing. You don't see, say, infanticide increasing. You don't see rates of male aggression. And I could be wrong on this, but I've never any accounts of it. Female aggression, female infanticide. You see one particular type of aggression. They're not all male, but they're mostly male. They're male biased, where in particular there's a significant imbalance of power. So, I think the average is around 7 adults against a single victim. Males from another group are much more likely to be targeted than females. So it looks to be the type of behavior that's adaptive. And you would expect, I don't dispute. I think on an evolutionary model, you would expect it to increase in certain conditions, such as when you have more males. You would expect it potentially to increase in times of resource abundance because the more males you have, the easier it is to form coalitions. I don't have a problem with Ferguson's claim that, some of chimpanzee raiding or killings may be exacerbated by human impacts, but that doesn't mean it strikes me as just completely implausible to think that this wasn't a behavior that has evolutionary significance and likely predate humans. Surely chimpanzees, we know there's plenty of populations that aren't around today of all different types of primates. Surely they face resource scarcity in the past. And
Yes, that's exactly what I said to him. That's exactly what I said, and I don't remember his answer word to word, but his answer was something like, "Yeah, I'm not against the possibility that there was like something had happened once in like a long time ago, and some chimpanzees had warlike dynamics. Then it's just that it's not like a big deal in the same way as you would think. Oh, if you only read like famous papers like Wrangham and Glowacki 2012, you will get the impression that that's just what chimpanzees do. It's chronic, it's constant, they do it all the time. And that's not what it really looks like if you go through the record. So what do you think? I think that there is the word constant and chronic in, for example, a famous paper that you wrote with Richard Wrangham.
yeah, and it's been a long time since I've read that paper, so I can't quote myself. I can't quote myself on it, but my understanding from talking to a lot of different chimpanzee researchers is that male chimpanzees really have a psychology where they're not capable of tolerating other male chimpanzees. Zoos have an enormous problem of introducing strange chimpanzee males to each other. It looks like that reaction is significantly less in bonobos. And like, where does that come from? Right. Presumably if they have that psychology, presumably it's the result of something in their evolutionary history.
But then couldn't that be interestingly used actually as an argument kind of either way? Because you could then also say that, well, in this case, humans are much more like bonobos because we're even more, open to the strangers, like you said earlier. And so maybe whatever is driving chimpanzees to war is a very interesting story. But that's a completely different story. Superficially, it looks so unbelievably similar when you look at the video. Please, anyone who's listening, to take the 3 minutes to watch the video in the links. It is just it's really remarkable. But yet, you see what I mean is that in the way that because chimpanzees are so unlike humans in this kind of uh, what you just described as kind of complete male incapacity of the males to interact with strange males, whatever dynamics, whatever is driving us to war are actually completely separate. It's only superficially similar. What would you think of that?
Yeah. So you just brought up the 2012 paper, which, I wrote as a grad student. And I think it's a fantastic paper, but my thinking has since evolved. Sometimes I wish the way scientific publishing worked is you could like go back and like revise your ideas like directly on. But I don't think chimpanzees are a great model to understand human intergroup relationships or even, the evolution of war in recent human history, say, since, the late Pleistocene or say the last 150,000 years. We are so fundamentally different. Our psychology is so fundamentally different that I think if your starting point, in the last, let's say, since the genus Homo is chimpanzees, I think you're going to have a really hard time understanding how we are such fantastic, wild cooperators. I can walk out of my office and I can see, 1,000 people that are strange males, and I'm not going to have any cortisol spike.
It's funny. I don't know if it was because I was preparing for this interview mentally, but I was just seeing friend for coffee, um, at London, around London City, today, and just walking from Farringdon Station towards the Barbican, and I mean, for people not familiar with London, that it's a busy area. It's a busy area, and I had this kind of when you just suddenly look with new eyes at something. And I was looking around myself. I was like, I love living in a big city because I can witness this every day. People of all sorts, from all walks of life, from all sorts of backgrounds, just doing their thing. And I don't know. And I was just smiling, walking on the street.
Yeah, it's really incredible, and there's no world, in which you could imagine chimpanzees doing something like this. So a lot of our psychology is much more bonobo-like, but bonobo-like compared taken to an extreme. So I don't think, if you want to understand the roots of war, really how humans do are the roots of intergroup relationships. I don't think chimpanzees are a good model. Nonetheless, I think it's really useful for thinking about our intergroup relationships, which include both cooperation and competition, war and trade, or war and friendship, to take a behavioral ecological approach and think about costs and benefits. And there were certainly costs and benefits to be there. It seems very plausible that there were costs and benefits within the evolution of Homo for sometimes lethal intergroup violence, just as there would have been significant costs and benefits for intergroup trade, which is why you can have the evolution of a species that has this remarkable capacity, both for killing, but also for cooperation, for altruism. Peace is actually, in my opinion, a thing that really begs explanation. We can have these sustained periods of durable, harmonious intergroup interactions. And this is remarkable. And to me, it's one of the most important things that we figure out how to understand. When did our species build this capacity? How do we maintain it? What are the conditions that cause it to collapse?